You've been lied to about your suffering, the pain that keeps you up at night, the trauma that shapes your decisions, the wounds that define your boundaries. You've been told to heal it, to overcome it, to move beyond it. What if that's precisely what's keeping you weak? Every self-help guru, every therapist, every well-meaning friend tells you the same comforting story. Your pain is something to be escaped. Your suffering is something to be eliminated. Your trauma is something to be healed. A convenient narrative that creates permanent patients, perpetual consumers, and perfect subjects. But beneath the surface of our therapeutic culture lies a forgotten truth so dangerous, so potentially explosive, that it's been systematically erased from our collective consciousness. A philosophical method so radical that it threatens the very foundations of how we understand human potential. Friedrich Nietzsche, perhaps the most misunderstood philosopher of the modern era, discovered this forbidden knowledge over a century ago. Your pain isn't your enemy. It's your untapped power source. Your suffering isn't your weakness. It's your greatest potential strength. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger. These famous words aren't just a motivational poster slogan. They're the gateway to a completely different understanding of human transformation. While the masses seek comfort, seek escape, seek distraction from their pain, a select few throughout history have discovered how to metabolize their suffering into extraordinary power, not by overcoming it, not by healing it, but by transmuting it through a psychological alchemy few dare to attempt. This isn't about positive thinking. It's not about finding silver linings. And it's certainly not about accepting comforting illusions. It's about embracing a method so fundamentally opposed to our therapeutic culture that it's been virtually erased from mainstream discourse. A method that doesn't promise happiness but something far more valuable, an unconquerable will forged in the fire of your deepest suffering. Today, we're going to explore Nietzsche's forbidden method for turning pain into power, a philosophical technology that's been hidden in plain sight, waiting for those brave enough to utilize it. Are you ready to discover what lies beyond healing? To understand Nietzsche's radical approach to transforming suffering, we need to first recognize how profoundly he challenged the prevailing wisdom of his time, and ours. Born in 1844 in Prussia, Friedrich Nietzsche lived a life intimately acquainted with suffering. Plagued by debilitating health problems, including blinding headaches, nausea, and eventual insanity, he had every reason to develop a philosophy of escape, of comfort, of resentment toward existence itself. Instead, he formulated perhaps the most life-affirming philosophy in Western thought. Not despite his suffering, but through it. The core of Nietzsche's forbidden method is his concept of will to power, arguably his most misunderstood idea. The will to power isn't about dominating others or seeking political control. It's about the fundamental drive within all life to expand, to overcome resistance, to transform obstacles into fuel for growth. My formula for greatness in a human being, Nietzsche wrote, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, but love it. This concept, amor fati, or love of fate, forms the foundation of Nietzsche's approach to suffering. Rather than merely accepting your pain or seeking to escape it, Nietzsche proposes something far more radical. Actively embracing it as necessary for your development, as essential to becoming who you truly are. This isn't masochism. It's not about seeking suffering for its own sake. It's about recognizing that your specific pains, your unique struggles, your particular traumas contain within them the precise resistance needed to develop your greatest strengths. Think of it like biological evolution. Species don't evolve in comfortable environments. They evolve in response to environmental pressures that force adaptation. Remove the pressure, and you remove the catalyst for growth. The same principle applies psychologically. Your comfort doesn't forge strength. Your challenges do. Nietzsche takes this further with his concept of the Übermensch, or overman, not a superior being in a racial or genetic sense, as his work was later misappropriated to suggest, but rather a psychological state of self-overcoming where one transforms suffering into meaning rather than seeking escape from it. The Übermensch doesn't transcend suffering. He transmutes it. He doesn't overcome pain. He incorporates it as essential material for his psychological development. This is the fundamental difference between Nietzsche's approach and our therapeutic culture. Modern therapy typically aims to heal trauma. Nietzsche aims to harness it. This brings us to perhaps his most difficult concept: eternal recurrence. Nietzsche posed a thought experiment. What if a demon told you that you must relive your life exactly as it is, with all its pain and suffering, infinitely? Would you despair, or would you recognize this as the ultimate affirmation of life? The eternal recurrence isn't a metaphysical claim about reality. It's a psychological test. Could you affirm your life so completely, including its deepest suffering, that you would willingly choose to live it again exactly as it is, forever? This willingness represents the ultimate psychological transformation, not the elimination of pain, but its complete integration into a life worthy of eternal repetition. The eternal recurrence isn't a metaphysical claim about reality. It's a psychological test. Could you affirm your life so completely, including its deepest suffering, that you would willingly choose to live it again exactly as it is, forever? This willingness represents the ultimate psychological transformation, not the elimination of pain, but its complete integration into a life worthy of eternal repetition. To understand why this approach is so revolutionary, we need to examine Nietzsche's critique of what he called slave morality versus master morality. Slave morality, in Nietzsche's view, emerges from weakness. It values comfort, safety, and equality because these protect the vulnerable. It frames suffering as inherently bad, something to be eliminated. It creates moral frameworks where victimhood confers virtue. Master morality, by contrast, emerges from strength. It values challenge, growth, and excellence because these express expanding life. It frames suffering as potentially valuable, something to be utilized. It creates frameworks where overcoming confers virtue. The critical insight here is that our entire therapeutic culture is built on slave morality's premises. We pathologize suffering rather than seeking its transformative potential. We create identities around our traumas rather than using them as raw material for becoming. We seek to eliminate pain rather than transmuting it into power. Nietzsche's approach flips this paradigm entirely. Rather than asking, "How can I escape this suffering?" he asks, "How is this suffering necessary for my becoming?" Rather than seeing pain as an obstacle to living, he recognizes it as essential to living deeply. Rather than seeking external comfort, he advises internal transformation. This doesn't mean accepting abuse or remaining in harmful situations. Nietzsche distinguishes between suffering that destroys and suffering that strengthens. The key is learning to recognize which is which, and most importantly, developing the capacity to metabolize destructive experiences after they've occurred, transmuting even the most horrific traumas into sources of extraordinary strength. How does this transformation happen? Through what Nietzsche calls self-overcoming, the process of continuously pushing beyond your current limitations, including your identification with your suffering. This isn't about denying your pain, but about refusing to be defined by it. It's about recognizing that you are not your suffering. You are the force capable of transforming it. Nietzsche's method directly challenges the victim mentality that permeates contemporary culture. While acknowledging the reality of victimization, he rejects victimhood as an identity. The difference is crucial. Victimization is something that happens to you. Victimhood is a psychological relationship with what happened that keeps you trapped in resentment, powerlessness, and stagnation. The forbidden knowledge here is that our therapeutic culture often inadvertently encourages victimhood while claiming to heal victimization. By framing trauma as primarily something to recover from rather than something to transform through, it can actually entrench suffering rather than transmute it. Nietzsche's most radical insight might be his understanding of resentment, which he called ressentiment. Resentment occurs when you cannot express your will to power outwardly, so it turns inward as a poisonous psychological state. The person consumed by resentment doesn't seek to overcome obstacles. They seek to tear down those who have overcome them. They don't pursue excellence. They redefine failure as moral superiority. Our current social landscape is saturated with resentment disguised as virtue. Entire identity frameworks built around permanent victimhood rather than continuous becoming. Nietzsche saw this coming with uncanny accuracy, predicting that as traditional religious frameworks declined, new secular religions of victimhood would emerge to fill the void. The truly forbidden aspect of Nietzsche's method is that it places responsibility for transformation entirely on the individual. While acknowledging systemic injustices and external constraints, it refuses to grant these conditions the power to determine your psychological response. It insists that regardless of what happens to you, the meaning you assign to those experiences remains within your domain of choice. This isn't toxic positivity or naive bootstrapping. It's a profound recognition that the alternative, locating the power for your psychological transformation outside yourself, inevitably leads to resentment, powerlessness, and stagnation. By placing the capacity for transmutation within, Nietzsche offers a path to genuine empowerment rather than perpetual dependence on external conditions for well-being. The method involves 3 key steps that directly challenge conventional approaches to suffering. First, complete acceptance of your suffering as necessary rather than accidental. This doesn't mean it's fair or deserved, but that it contains specific resistance essential for your particular development. Second, reinterpretation of pain not as punishment, but as pressure needed to forge strength. Just as physical resistance builds muscle, psychological resistance builds character, but only if engaged with, rather than avoided. Third, transmutation of suffering into meaning through creative expression and self-overcoming. This isn't about finding meaning in suffering, but actively creating meaning from it, transforming raw pain into refined purpose through the alchemical process of creative will. These steps don't eliminate suffering. They transform your relationship with it. The pain doesn't disappear. It becomes incorporated into an expanding sense of self, capable of containing and utilizing it rather than being defined by it. The trauma isn't erased. It's metabolized into a source of insight and strength unavailable to those who haven't experienced it. This is Nietzsche's forbidden method. Not a path to happiness, but a path to power. Not a journey to comfort, but a journey to greatness. Not an escape from suffering, but a complete transformation of suffering into the precise conditions needed for your highest becoming. Let's move from theory to practice. How does Nietzsche's method for transmuting pain into power manifest in real life? The examples are everywhere once you know what to look for. Consider physical challenges. The conventional approach treats pain as a signal to stop, a warning to retreat. But elite athletes understand what Nietzsche recognized. Certain forms of physical suffering are necessary for development. The burning sensation during intense training isn't damage, it's adaptation in process. The exhaustion of pushing beyond previous limits isn't depletion, its expansion occurring. A revealing study of Olympic athletes found that what distinguished gold medalists wasn't talent or even training volume, but their relationship with pain. While others sought to minimize discomfort, champions developed the capacity to reinterpret pain signals as evidence of effectiveness rather than warnings of harm. They didn't overcome pain, they transformed their relationship with it. This principle extends far beyond athletics. Consider how entrepreneurs respond to failure. The conventional approach treats business setbacks as something to avoid, recover from, move beyond. But the most successful entrepreneurs exhibit a Nietzschean relationship with failure. They don't just accept it. They actively mine it for crucial data unavailable through any other means. Elon Musk's early career was marked by devastating failures that would have destroyed someone operating from conventional wisdom. SpaceX's first 3 rocket launches failed spectacularly. Tesla nearly went bankrupt multiple times. But rather than retreating from these painful experiences, Musk exemplifies Nietzsche's method by transmuting each failure into essential knowledge for future success. Perhaps the most powerful examples come from those who have endured severe trauma. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, developed an approach remarkably aligned with Nietzsche's philosophy. Rather than merely surviving his suffering or seeking to heal from it, Frankl transmuted his horrific experience into logotherapy, a therapeutic approach that has helped millions find meaning in their own suffering. Frankl didn't overcome his trauma. He incorporated it as essential material for his life's work. He didn't move beyond his pain. He moved through it, transforming it from meaningless torture into the foundation for profound contribution. This is Nietzsche's method in its most potent form. Even in everyday relationships, the difference between conventional approaches and Nietzsche's method becomes apparent. Consider how people typically handle betrayal or heartbreak. The standard approach treats these as wounds to heal from, experiences to get over. The Nietzschean approach recognizes them as necessary pressures that reveal essential truths about yourself and human nature. Truths unavailable to those who haven't experienced similar pain. A particularly striking example appears in how different people process rejection. Those operating from conventional wisdom treat rejection as something to recover from, often through external validation or avoidance of similar situations. Those applying Nietzsche's method treat rejection as valuable resistance that strengthens their resilience and clarifies their path. The pain isn't eliminated. It's incorporated as necessary feedback. The contrast becomes even clearer in professional contexts. When facing criticism, most people either defend against it or internalize it as evidence of inadequacy. The Nietzschean approach transforms criticism into precise data about where growth is possible. The pain of having your work critiqued isn't avoided. It's actively sought as essential for development. A controversial but revealing example appears in how different people respond to societal constraints. The conventional approach treats systemic limitations as primarily external problems to be solved through collective action. While acknowledging the importance of social change, Nietzsche's method also recognizes these constraints as specific resistances that can forge unique strengths unavailable to those who haven't faced them. Consider historical figures who faced severe oppression. Nelson Mandela didn't merely survive 27 years of imprisonment. He transformed that experience into extraordinary capacity for leadership and reconciliation. His suffering wasn't incidental to his development. It was integral to becoming the precise person capable of leading South Africa's transition. Even in creative pursuits, Nietzsche's method reveals its power. Artists who produce truly original work don't avoid the suffering of isolation, misunderstanding, and failure. They recognize these pains as necessary conditions for creating something genuinely new. The conventional approach seeks comfort and acceptance. The Nietzschean approach understands that comfort often produces mediocrity, while productive discomfort forges excellence. Frida Kahlo's extraordinary art emerged directly from her physical suffering. Rather than merely seeking to escape her pain, she transmuted it into visual expression that continues to resonate globally. Her suffering wasn't separate from her artistic genius. It was the essential material from which that genius formed itself. Perhaps the most controversial application appears in parenting. Modern approaches often seek to minimize children's discomfort, protecting them from necessary struggles. Nietzsche would recognize this as undermining their development. Children deprived of appropriate challenges never develop the capacity to transmute difficulty into strength. By eliminating productive suffering, well-meaning parents inadvertently create psychological fragility. Research increasingly confirms this Nietzschean insight. Studies show that children who never experience failure develop failure avoidance that significantly limits their adult achievement. Those never allowed to experience appropriate risk become risk-averse adults with diminished capacity for innovation and resilience. Even in mental health, where conventional approaches focus primarily on symptom reduction, Nietzsche's method offers a different paradigm. Rather than framing anxiety or depression as purely negative states to eliminate, it recognizes their potential as signals indicating where transformation is needed. The pain isn't meaningless suffering to remove, it's meaningful feedback to incorporate. Post-traumatic growth research provides empirical support for Nietzsche's approach. Studies consistently show that many trauma survivors don't merely recover to baseline functioning. They develop psychological strengths unavailable to those who haven't experienced similar challenges. This isn't about minimizing trauma's devastating impact, but recognizing the human capacity to transmute even the most severe suffering into extraordinary development. The application extends to how we consume information. The conventional approach seeks content that confirms existing beliefs, providing comfortable validation. Nietzsche's method actively seeks intellectual challenges that create cognitive discomfort, recognizing that genuine growth occurs at the boundaries of current understanding. The mental discomfort of having your ideas challenged isn't avoided. It's pursued as necessary for intellectual development. Even our relationship with technology reveals the contrast. Most people use digital tools to maximize comfort and minimize friction. Those applying Nietzsche's insights use these same tools to create productive challenges that forge greater focus, deeper thinking, and enhanced creativity. The discomfort of sustained attention isn't eliminated through constant distraction. It's engaged as essential for meaningful work. These examples reveal a consistent pattern. Those who achieve extraordinary development don't escape suffering. They transform their relationship with it. They don't overcome pain. They incorporate it as necessary material for becoming. They don't transcend challenges. They transmute them into the precise conditions required for their unique growth. This isn't about glorifying suffering for its own sake. It's about recognizing that pain, strategically engaged with rather than automatically avoided, contains transformative potential unavailable through any other means. The Nietzschean method doesn't create suffering, it reveals its hidden purpose. We've ventured into territory that challenges our culture's fundamental assumptions about suffering. We've explored Nietzsche's forbidden method for transmuting pain into power, not by escaping it, not by healing it, but by incorporating it as essential material for your highest becoming. This knowledge places you at a crossroads. You can continue following the conventional wisdom that treats your pain as an enemy to overcome, your suffering as a mistake to correct, your trauma as damage to repair. You can keep seeking escape, comfort, distraction from the very experiences that contain your greatest potential for transformation. Or you can embrace the radical alternative that Nietzsche offers, recognizing your specific pains as necessary pressures for your unique development, viewing your particular challenges not as arbitrary misfortunes, but as precise resistances required for your authentic strength to emerge. This isn't a path for everyone. It demands a courage that few cultivate, a honesty that most avoid, a responsibility that many refuse. It requires looking directly at your suffering without flinching, without rationalizing, without the comforting narratives of victimhood that our culture so readily provides. But consider the alternative. To remain trapped in resentment toward your pain is to remain forever defined by it. To continuously seek escape from suffering is to continuously affirm its power over you. To frame your trauma primarily as damage is to ensure it remains exactly that, never transforming into the foundation for extraordinary strength. Nietzsche's method begins with a single, revolutionary shift in perspective, asking not, how can I escape this suffering? But how is this suffering necessary for who I am becoming? Not, why did this happen to me? But, what can I now do with what has happened? Not, how can I return to who I was before this pain? But who must I become to incorporate this pain into an expanding sense of self? This shift doesn't happen once. It happens continuously, a moment-by-moment choice to transmute rather than escape, to incorporate rather than avoid, to transform rather than merely endure. It's the daily practice of asking better questions about your suffering, questions that reveal its potential rather than reinforcing its permanence. Start with your most persistent pain, that suffering you've tried repeatedly to escape. What if it contains precisely the resistance needed for your authentic strength? What if it's not an obstacle to your development, but a necessary condition for it? What if the very specificity of your pain contains information about your unique path? Examine the narratives you've constructed about your suffering. Do they frame you primarily as a victim of circumstances, or as a creative force capable of transmuting those circumstances? Do they locate power outside yourself, or do they recognize your capacity to assign meaning, regardless of external conditions? Challenge yourself to identify one specific pain you've been avoiding and deliberately engage with it as material for growth rather than an experience to escape. This isn't about seeking additional suffering. It's about transforming your relationship with the suffering already present in your life. Recognize the subtle ways our culture encourages perpetual victimhood while claiming to promote healing. Notice how certain therapeutic approaches inadvertently entrench identification with trauma rather than facilitating its transmutation. Question whether comfort is always beneficial and whether certain forms of discomfort might be essential for your development. This practice isn't about achieving some perfect state where suffering no longer affects you. It's about developing the capacity to incorporate ever greater challenges into an expanding sense of self, capable of containing and utilizing them rather than being defined by them. It's about continuous becoming rather than final arrival. The most profound aspect of Nietzsche's method isn't that it eliminates pain. It's that it eliminates the fear of pain. When you no longer view suffering as something to avoid at all costs, you gain access to possibilities closed to those trapped in comfort-seeking. When you recognize that your strength emerges precisely through engagement with resistance, you stop seeing challenges as obstacles to your path and start recognizing them as the path itself. This isn't just personal, it's profoundly social. A culture of people engaged in transmuting their individual suffering rather than projecting it outward, as resentment creates entirely different collective outcomes than what we currently experience. The choice to incorporate your pain rather than weaponize it has implications far beyond your individual development. As Nietzsche himself wrote, the highest goal would be to view life as a means to knowledge, not knowledge as comfortable information that confirms existing beliefs, but knowledge as transformation that emerges only through direct engagement with life's most challenging aspects. So I challenge you, stop running from your pain. Stop treating your suffering as a mistake to correct. Stop viewing your trauma as merely damage to repair. Start recognizing these experiences as the precise pressures needed to forge your authentic strength, to reveal your unique path, to catalyze your highest becoming. This doesn't mean seeking additional suffering. It means transforming your relationship with the suffering already present in your life. It means recognizing that the path to extraordinary power isn't found in escaping pain, but in alchemizing it into expanded capacity through the transformative force of creative will. The choice is yours. Continue seeking escape from the very experiences that contain your greatest potential for transformation. Or embrace Nietzsche's forbidden method, not a path to happiness, but a path to power. Not a journey to comfort, but a journey to greatness. Not an escape from suffering, but a complete transmutation of suffering into the precise conditions needed for your highest becoming. As Nietzsche himself challenged, what if pleasure and displeasure were so tied together that whoever wanted to have as much as possible of one must also have as much as possible of the other? You have the choice. Either as little displeasure as possible, painlessness in brief, or as much displeasure as possible as the price for the growth of an abundance of subtle pleasures and joys that have rarely been relished yet. If you decide for the former and desire to diminish and lower the level of human pain, you also have to diminish and lower the level of their capacity for joy. The time has come to make your choice. Will you diminish your pain and consequently your power? Or will you transform your relationship with suffering and access potentials unavailable to those who continuously seek escape? The method awaits those brave enough to apply it.